Donald Trump's shadow looms large over Australian and Canadian elections. In the next 2 weeks, Canadian and Australian voters will go to the polls. In both elections, the opposition Conservative parties were originally favored to win, no longer. Both Canada's Conservatives, led by Pierre Poilievre, and Peter Dutton's Liberals, have seen stunning collapses in their polling numbers that now have them placed behind the center-left incumbents. It's really interesting having these two elections running in parallel, said Ben Wellings, a senior lecturer in politics at Melbourne's Monash University. Both Poilievre and Dutton are dropping in the polls, and I do think that this is something to do with the problem that Donald Trump is posing for these center-right candidates, he said. There was a sense after Trump's election that he was at the head of a disruptive right-wing wave, and that this was great for the right everywhere. It hasn't turned out that way. The drop is clearly visible in the polls in both countries. In Australia, the coalition began a gradual climb in the polls in 2023. By late last year, it had passed Labour in popularity and seemed primed to continue its rise. But the numbers fell off a cliff in February this year, just after Mr. Trump's inauguration and as the U.S. president launched his trade war against America's allies. In Australia, the coalition began a gradual climb in the polls in 2023. By late last year, it had passed Labour in popularity and seemed primed to continue its rise. But the numbers fell off a cliff in February this year, just after Mr. Trump's inauguration and as the U.S. president launched his trade war against America's allies. In Canada, there's an equally stark turning point on the graph in January for the Conservatives, from a 20-point lead to a 6-point deficit behind the ruling center-left Canadian Liberal Party. Until then, the Conservatives had been on track to trounce the Liberals, who were deeply unpopular after 9 years in government. But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's defiant response to Mr. Trump's trade war and talk of making Canada the 51st state of the USA galvanized Canadians. After Mr. Trudeau stood aside last month, new Prime Minister Mark Carney kept up the tough talk against Mr. Trump, and support for the Liberals continued to rise. When you start questioning sovereignty, when you start questioning the validity of the existence of a state, that completely changed the tone of the election, said Clayton Chin, a Canadian-Australian associate professor in political theory at Melbourne University. Pierre Poilievre suddenly had to try and pivot. He didn't do it fast enough. In February, Australian opposition leader Peter Dutton was criticized for describing Mr. Trump as shrewd, a big thinker and a deal-maker over his plan to turn Gaza into a real estate development. And he named Senator Jacinta Price as his shadow minister for government efficiency, a move echoing Mr. Trump's appointment of Elon Musk to the U.S.'s new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. The Trump link was strengthened when Senator Price used the phrase, "Make Australia Great Again" at a news conference and later appeared in a photo wearing a MAGA hat, which she dismissed as a joke. Both Conservative leaders are obviously dealing with parties that have a variety of types of figures in them, and some of those figures are very sympathetic to Trump's politics and have actual and continuing ties to the Trump administration, Dr. Chin said. Antony Green, the ABC's chief election analyst, said there were parallels between Mr. Trump's impact on the Canadian and Australian Conservative campaigns, but they shouldn't be overstated. The coalition has had a boost with those populist-type stands which have been popular in America, but in the last month or two, the Liberal Party, which is a more centrist party in Australia, has sort of walked back from those positions, he said. The impact of Donald Trump on Canada is much more visceral. They've had their independence virtually threatened by becoming the 51st state. The tariffs that have been imposed are much higher than on Australia. But there are parallels here. Most conservative parties around the world have been attracted by some of the populist trends in American politics, which have proved popular. But since Donald Trump has been in power, populism seems to have become less attractive than it was. The anti-Trump sentiment in Australia is reflected in opinion polling. Last week, a Resolve Monitor poll published in 9 newspapers reported 35% of undecided voters were less likely to back Mr. Dutton because of changes wrought by Mr. Trump, compared to 24% for Anthony Albanese. A Lowy Institute poll published this weekend showed almost two-thirds of Australians held not very much trust or no trust at all in the United States to act responsibly. That has been reflected in responses to the ABC's Your Say project throughout the campaign, with Australia's relationship to the Trump administration consistently appearing among the top concerns. Dr. Chin said the depth of feeling in Canada and Australia came from the same place, both countries' decades of closeness to the United States. There's a real strong sense of the betrayal of friends, he said. That sense that we accepted your leadership, we supported it, even against some moral, political, or ethical concerns around certain types of things, and yet this is where it's landed us. Of course, polls can be wrong, and Election Day can throw up big surprises. But in Canada, at least, a post-mortem of the Conservative campaign has already begun. Blowing a 25-point lead and being like 10 points down is campaign malpractice at the highest level, said Conservative strategist Corey Tennick in a blistering attack on his own party's performance. I know it's uncomfortable for people to hear that said out loud, but the numbers are the numbers, and saying that you don't believe in polls, if you're managing a campaign, it's delusional. Antony Green said the Canadian polls had seen a dramatic turnaround. You just do not get normal turnarounds like that without major external shocks, and that major external shock has been Donald Trump.